Here. Counsel Belanger?
Here.
Counsel Mercia?
Here.
There's 3 present. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Also joining us tonight, Manager Murphy, Councilor Milanazzo, Police Superintendent Bill Taylor, Fire Chief Jeff Winwood, Beverly Woods and Jay Donovan from MCOG. And tonight's 2 agenda items. The first one is a discussion regarding the regionalization of the 911 dispatch center. And on the second on the agenda, if time permits, will be the use of tasers by the Lowell Police Department. With that being said, I'll turn it over to Ms. Woods and Mr. Donovan for a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us this evening. We have been working on a project in our office for the past 6 years to look at the feasibility of consolidating 911 dispatch services across the region. We initiated this project in 2009 at the request of the city and town managers and administrators because they were interested in seeing whether this concept was one that would improve the quality of service that's provided to the residents in the communities across the region. That really was the highest priority for this project, was seeing if there was a way to improve the level of service that communities received. We applied for and received a grant from the State 911 Department to undertake a feasibility study to see, first of all, whether it was physically possible to consolidate those services, what impact it had on the level of service, and what the cost might be of undertaking such a project. That feasibility study concluded that consolidating services across the 9 communities improved the quality of service that our residents would receive and would result in significant cost savings for the communities. However, at the end of the feasibility study, there were a number of questions that remained. We really needed to look at more in depth at questions regarding personnel. How would such a center be staffed? At budgeting, how would it be funded and paid for? We needed to identify a location for siting the facility, and we also needed to look at how a facility like this might be governed. We presented the feasibility analysis to the chief elected officials in all 9 communities, and by the time we were finished with our presentations, we had 7 communities who were interested in continuing on with the study process. Billerica and Westford decided not to continue, and I'll add that both those communities currently have separate police and fire dispatching, and Westford is now in the process of combining their fire and police dispatch. In 2013, we applied for a development grant from the State 911 Department to prepare an implementation plan to address some of the outstanding issues that remained. We looked at 9 potential sites for locating a 911 dispatch facility. We prepared a draft intermunicipal agreement and looked at cost and budgeting information and staffing. And I will add that throughout this whole process, we have had a 911 work group that's comprised of the police and fire chiefs who have met regularly for the past 6 years to tackle this issue. The implementation plan, again, recommended that the communities consolidate their 911 dispatch services, and that every community that was involved at that point in time decided to continue to the next phase of the study. So we're here this evening to present the information that has come out of an update to the implementation plan. In 2014, we received a professional services grant from the State 911 Department to look at the impact of Next Generation 911 on a regional facility and on the local communities currently, if they were not to consolidate, to look at the impact of sending all wireless calls to each community. Right now, if you dial 911 on your cell phone, your call goes to the Essex Regional Emergency Communication Center, and then it is transferred to the community. We looked at identifying a preferred site for the Regional Emergency Communication Center, and we also looked at options for our smaller communities. Our smaller communities, Dunstable, Pepperell, and Tingsboro, have indicated a desire to consolidate with communities that are of a like size. So we will be presenting to them some options there of either becoming part of a regional center that Groton now operates or being part of the Neshoba Valley Regional Emergency Communication Center. We also refined the financial information in the intermunicipal agreement, and we developed a staffing plan for the center. So this evening we're going to present to you the consolidation option for Chelmsford, Dracut, Lowell, and Tewksbury. We looked at the call volumes across all 4 of those communities, and you'll see that Lowell's call volume is 4 or 5 times that of each of the smaller suburban communities, but in total, about 47,000 911 calls are answered across the 4 communities. We also looked at the number of personnel that are on duty each shift in the communities. Right now, we have a total of 12 dispatchers on duty within the 4 towns on the day shift, 12 on the afternoon shift, and 10 on the night shift. And then we looked at, we're having a little trouble with our mouse, sorry. Maybe we can use the arrow keys. Well, my next slide is supposed to be the, go back to where you were, that slide. We then looked at the budgets for each of the 4 communities in terms of how much is currently being spent today to operate the 911 dispatch services within the communities. And right now, in total, the 4 communities are spending about $3.6 million, with Lowell spending about $1.8. So then, with the help of our consultant and working with the police and fire chiefs, we developed a staffing plan for a regional facility. For this particular consolidation, the recommendation is that there be an executive director to oversee the center, an administrative assistant, 39 dispatchers, 7 working supervisors who would also be manning a console, and that in terms of the shift assignments, that there be 10 dispatchers assigned to the day shift, which would include actually 9 dispatchers and a supervisor, 10 on the evening shift, 9 dispatchers again and a supervisor, and 10 on the overnight shift. We looked at the annual cost for operating a regional center with that particular personnel plan. And we basically determined that when we consider the incentive grant funding that would come from the state provides incentive grants to regional centers. It would cost about $2.5 million, and the incentive grant would be about $948,000. So the next thing that we looked at was how these costs would be assigned to the communities. And there are participation ratios that were developed based on the call volumes and the populations in each community, and this is the same formula that the State 911 Department currently uses for providing grant funds to the local communities. And you will see here that under this particular consolidation, Lowell's cost would be about 59% of the total cost of operating the facility. So then we looked at cost savings. And with this particular consolidation, one of the interesting elements of this is that all of our communities are now on sort of the hook for replacing equipment as it wears out in their 911 dispatch centers. So we annualized the cost based on data that was provided by each community of replacing that equipment, and found that, for example, in Lowell, you spend about $241,000 on an annual basis to maintain and replace your equipment. So when we consider the savings that include the efficiencies that are gained from consolidation plus the deferred expenses for equipment, we find that collectively the communities would save about $1.1 million if they were to consolidate, with Lowell saving about $266,000 a year. In a regional facility, the state assumes all of the costs for the equipment replacement, so communities are not responsible for that. I mentioned before that the state has grant monies to basically incentivize consolidation. If a decision were made to build a regional emergency communications center, the state would fund all of the architectural costs, engineering, design cost, all of the building construction costs, including the materials, the labor, the financing, all of the equipment that would be needed for the center. That would include the radio systems, computers, consoles, the computer-aided dispatch system, the records management system, the fire alarm, receiving and alerting, and all of the furnishings that would be needed for the center. They would also provide out in the community any equipment that the city might need to communicate with the regional center. And as an additional incentive, the State 911 Department does pay for the executive director's salary 1 year in advance of the center going online and for the first year of operations. There are other potential savings that would be realized if consolidation were to happen. I mentioned before that the Essex Regional Emergency Communications System now receives all of the cell phone 911 calls. And when they receive those calls, if there's, for example, a large accident and 15 people call to report the accident, they handle all 15 calls and only one call gets transferred to the community. If we had a regional emergency communication system, there's an opportunity there for the regional center to receive all of those wireless calls, and the State 911 Department provides financial assistance for handling those calls. So it's estimated that the incentive payment to the regional center would increase to a bit over $1 million for receiving the wireless calls from all 4 communities, and that would further reduce the costs of operating the center. We looked at governance of the RECC, and there is a requirement under state law that each community sign a district agreement that outlines how the center will be governed. There would be a board of directors comprised of the city and town managers, and the draft agreement that we now have in place calls for 1 community, 1 vote. Under Chapter 500 of the Acts of 2014, there must be a financial advisory subcommittee comprised of the chief financial officer and the chief administrative officer in each municipality. And there would also be an operations committee comprised of the police and fire chiefs that would oversee the day-to-day operations of the center and basically determine what standard operating procedures should be within the center, and a technology subcommittee that would manage and maintain all of the technology and equipment within the center. We looked at, as I mentioned, sites for the center. There are nationally accepted criteria and standards that have to be met for siting this type of facility. Initially, we looked at 3 sites that were shortlisted out of the 9 sites that had been originally on the table, and narrowed it down to Tewksbury State Hospital, the UMass Lowell West Campus, and some land that Tewksbury owns at their DPW facility. And we really focus mostly on public sites because the one expense that the 911 department will not cover is land costs, so we really were looking for a publicly owned site. The analysis that we have done has shown that the Tewksbury DPW site is the most preferable. It helps that it's municipally owned so that we would not have to seek special legislation or go through the DCAM process in order to acquire the site for this purpose. There are a number of new requirements that are basically being put into effect over the next year. I mentioned before that there was Next Generation 911 being implemented in Massachusetts. This is something that will be in place by July 1st, 2016, and is an FCC requirement. It's an IP-based systems, and communities must now have the capability to handle text messages, images, videos, and data that the public sends in addition to handling the usual 911 calls. The state is in the process of assessing the capacity of all of the PSAPs across the Commonwealth, and this is a significant requirement and really increases the technology that must be in place in the local communities. In the future, the state has a desire to send all of those 911 calls directly to the community if they're not being handled by a regional center, so that will significantly increase the call volumes that communities must now handle. There are a number of benefits of establishing the RECC. I've talked a bit about the fact that we can enhance the quality of services that are provided for residents. The dispatchers would now be working in a modern state-of-the-art facility. There is a large increase in the capabilities of the center. Right now, every community has a limited number of dispatchers on duty at one time. If there's a major incident in a community, instead of having your usual dispatchers on hand, you now have a large staff of 10 dispatchers who can help in such a crisis. There are cost savings for all of the communities through greater economies of scale. The replacement of equipment would be handled by the state. And there's also a great enhancement of information sharing among communities. We all know that criminals do not obey geographic boundaries. If there's a rash of house breaks across the region, or there's a vehicle pursuit, the dispatchers from all of the communities are sitting right there, and they're more readily able to exchange information. By regionalizing, you would also be relieving the local communities of dealing with any additional state and federal requirements, which I've already discussed. And this also establishes a career path for the dispatchers. And in most of our communities, if you're a dispatcher, there really isn't any ladder that you can climb for advancement. In a regional center, there will be supervisor positions, and there will be an executive director's position, so there is an opportunity to advance. In terms of implementing on RECC, the communities would all need to adopt the district agreement that I had discussed previously. They would then need to apply for design funding and for funding for the executive director salary from the state 911 department. The executive director would then be hired, and the design process would begin. The chiefs would work together on establishing the standard operating procedures and policies for the center. Construction could begin, and then as you're nearing the conclusion of the construction process, you would start to hire and train your personnel. And we estimate that it would take 2 to 3 years to cut over to a regional center. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Woods. Hey, Ms. Donovan. Any questions from the committee? Councilor Bashir, sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Woods, for your presentation. However, I see that you're looking at your presentation, and I would have appreciated the fact if you would have gave us the presentation, and then later on we could put it on the desk for our colleagues to see. You have something there, and I only have to try to remember all the things that you said, so would have been nice if we would have had that too. Having said that, I just have some questions here, and there is concern about the histories and data stored in different towns' computers systems. Would it be transferable to whatever you're going to have there?
All of the records that are in the record management systems in all of the communities would be transferred over to the regional center, so none of that history would be lost.
Would we have accessibility of the police records that are now readily available in-house and frequently accessed during calls?
Well, I'll let the chief speak to that issue, but in terms...
Such as restraining orders and stolen car reports, which I think is very helpful. That's what I wanted to know. You don't have that answer?
I'm not sure how they are stored currently. My understanding is all of the records would be consolidated from all 4 communities into the records of the regional center. The mechanics for how that is accomplished is beyond my technical area of expertise. If our consultant were here, I'm sure he could answer that question.
Now, the next comment I make is not directed to you, but it's my feeling in general that when you think that you're going to save time and call 911 and you think someone from the Lowell dispatch is going to pick it up and send somebody, I think it's a darn shame that we can get a man on the moon, but we can call 911 and go to Essex RECC, and then it's transferred over. That's valuable time lost, in my personal opinion. So what I'm hearing tonight is if you join this consolidation, we will probably eliminate that. Why can't we just eliminate it right off the bat? And when I call 911, I get someone in Lowell that knows where they're sending us. Because I know we had an emergency at work and we needed 911 immediately. Had I been at work, I would have called directly I would have called you, Chief, I kid you not. But that is my concern. I do have an opinion. I like the personal touch. I also like the territorial knowledge that comes with that personal touch. I feel that dispatchers in the city know the area so well that they don't have to look up anything when they send units out. And as a result, time is saved. That's my personal opinion. And so is the person requiring the quick response. They appreciate that too. And I want people that know the geographical intricacies of our city. I see that it's going to take 2 to 3 years, and that lapse in service to me, I don't know. You're going to be training new people. What about our people that are already on duty? And I want dispatchers to know things like current landmarks, long-gone landmarks, because I know years ago, I can go back and tell you some landmarks that people probably don't know existed, but our old-timers like myself would know that know the difference between streets that are similar, like Livingston Street versus Livingston Avenue, Highland Avenue versus Highland Street, etc. I don't want to call emergency and get someone from Tewksbury that's going to send someone to Highland Street when I live on Highland Avenue. And I'm very concerned with a weighted membership. Other than being an equal partner, we share 59% of the cost. I think we should have a little bit more than an equal partner here. I believe small towns can do well with their regional center approach, but I think the city is an entity by itself. These are my opinions, so if you can convince me otherwise, I'm still open for discussion here, so that's where I stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Belanger?
Not at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, I would echo Councilor Mercer's remarks, especially concerning the difference between streets and avenues in the city. I mean, if you go to Centerville, you have First up to 19th Street, and then Pawtuckaville, you have, First Ave, Second Ave, Third Ave, Fourth Ave. There are multiple streets in the city that have that distinction in between. And I really do think that, local people that know the area have been working for a long period of time. I think that would be a benefit that would probably outweigh the cost savings that may be attributed. The one question I do have is maybe, if you can answer it for us, or maybe the chief. You did state that the wireless phone calls within a year, will we be able to pick that up as a city dispatch chief within a year, or was it just through the regionalization?
I would think it would be at least a year. I think it's on. It would be at least a year, but that is the goal of the statewide 911 board, is to get those wireless calls out to either regional consortiums like the REC or to local communities. Currently, Boston does get their own wireless calls, and we see a significant shift in the calls for service into our communications center. It's approximately 60 to 70% wireless calls, and clearly that's the trend of the future.
So if you look at the timing of, if it took part in this, 2 or 3 years, in that time period, Lowell should have the capability of taking the wireless calls in?
Absolutely, we should be looking to that, because each call, 911 call into a communications center, has essentially a monetary value affixed to that. So in way of the money that we get kicked back to the community from the state. So currently, the wireless calls go to a regional center, mostly for the greater Lowell area. They go to the Essex County facility in Middleton. And so Essex County gets the small financial contribution for each one of those calls accredited to them, and we do not currently. So we'd be looking, we get a very small amount, so we'd be looking to tap into that to help supplement our operations cost as we go forward.
Yeah. And Mr. Manager, I'm sure you're looking at something like that already. Great.
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
Currently, the policy is, previously the state police handled all the 911 wireless calls. They're now transferring it to the RECCs. Currently, they're not making it available to PSAPs. All right, until there's a change in the policy, there's a limitation in terms of transferring those wireless calls directly to the city of Lowell. So that's one of the advantages right now that the RECC has over the city of Lowell as a PSAP in terms of receiving those wireless calls.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Manager?
Yes, thank you. First of all, I want to congratulate Ms. Woods and Mr. Donovan on their thorough and thought-provoking research and presentation. The city, I want you to assure, has been intimately involved in this process prior to my coming here and since I've come here. We've attended the planning meetings, and we've researched the issues on our own, and we've done thorough research relative to this regional 911 call center, and we have concerns about joining this regional call center. Concerns large enough to recommend against joining the regional call center. And basically, they surround two major areas. First, finances, and second, management and operations. We do not believe that the savings are going to be significant for the city of Lowell. And to explain that, I'd like our data analyst, Rodney Conley, to address the subcommittee on that financial issue.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. So as part of the process, as the manager mentioned, we worked along with NIBCOG and on our own to dig into the financial numbers to project what savings are potentially available by moving to the regional 911. So the first one we looked at was obviously the annual savings. These are more of their fixed costs, salary and wages, operations, supplies, etc. And when you factor in the grants available through the RECC, as well as the grants we currently receive through the State 911 Incentive Grant, the offset was nominal at best. It looked like we'd probably save about $25,000 a year by moving to the regional 911. Then the second piece we looked at was the potential revenue by trying to incorporate wireless calls into the city system versus the regional 911. As the projections show, I think it was about $105,000 extra they could potentially receive. So if you prorate that out, we'd be looking at about $62,000 on the city side, sort of a rough estimate. The question would be, are we able, as the chief alluded to capture that money on our own outside of the regional dispatch center? So that would be a question to look into as well. And then lastly were the capital costs, which a little bit of an unknown. We just spent significant money a few years ago upgrading our own system. I believe, Chief, was it about $4.5 million overall to build our dispatch center along with the emergency operations center, with the goal being that they can rotate back and forth and upgrade as needed. So the rough numbers of about $240,000 a year in savings and capital expenses. We looked into those. Our number was a little bit less. We were looking at about $227,000 per year. But again, that would be if we had to build it from scratch tomorrow. I think as we look into this, we don't necessarily have to build it from scratch, and we don't necessarily need to begin these upgrades tomorrow. So,
Thank you, Mr. Conley. Like I mentioned before, we do have Superintendent Taylor and Chief Winwood here. Chief, I'll start with you. Your opinion of this plan?
Thank you, Council. From the fire department angle, there are a few disadvantages to the regional center. Currently, our dispatch center is right next door to our main fire station, and occasionally we have issues with hardware or software or dispatch issues, and our deputy chiefs spend a lot of time going next door to work those issues out, and it's very convenient to have the dispatch center located right next door to the fire station. And also, our deputy chiefs can respond to an emergency from that dispatch center where it's in the center of the city. And driving out to Tewksbury would take some time, and then driving back at an emergency would also take some time. I think that Lowell should have more of a vote in the Board of Directors. In the future, if we decided to consolidate our hardware and our software, where we have so many more calls than the towns do, it will be important for Lowell to have more of a vote into what kind of hardware, what kind of software we chose. As far as our SOPs, the fire departments are different in the city of Lowell as compared to the smaller towns. We'll send more trucks to a fire call. We might send 5 trucks, where a smaller town might send 1 or 2 or 3. And the departments are different. And to try to cross-train different dispatchers would be challenging. Also, it's an advantage to have dispatchers that are familiar with the city of Lowell, with the landmarks, has been mentioned earlier by Councilor Mercier. Having an intimate knowledge of the streets, the landmarks, the different neighborhoods, the different names of the streets is huge when the time means everything for the fire department in an emergency. Another disadvantage I see is that the dispatchers would have to reapply for their job. Even though the number of dispatchers would be the same, the dispatchers in Lowell wouldn't necessarily be guaranteed a job, and I don't think that's fair to the current dispatchers. I actually started as a dispatcher on the fire department many years ago, and I know the challenges in the city, where the city is different than some of the towns, the different neighborhoods. I think it's a big advantage to have people that are familiar with the streets. So that's about all I have.
Great, Chief, thank you. It's a valid point. Superintendent Taylor?
Thank you, Councilor. I do have serious concerns about the city of Lowell going to a regional dispatch center. Principal among them is the loss of local control. Currently, the communications center for the city of Lowell dispatches both police, fire, and also through Trinity, our ambulance provider, emergency medical services. That control goes from the city manager to me in the police department, and the police department manages it very much in partnership with the fire department from their perspective. So we would lose that local control of the communications center. And what we would lose with that is a strong cultural shift from the way that we currently do business, and I'm not sure that that's an advantage, quite candidly. Right now, the way it operates is the Lowell Police Department and the Fire Department have the ability to immediately insert a sworn supervisor into that communications room to take over the operations when a critical incident happens in the city of Lowell. And we would lose that ability because it would certainly be off-site. The most likely scenario would be in the town of Tewksbury. And what we would lose with that, we would lose the ability of the supervisor to interact face-to-face, real-time, with the dispatchers and the other communications personnel that currently reside there. And there's no substitute for that face-to-face interaction, and we would lose that. A real significant issue with this is the governance model that is being proposed. The city of Lowell has 500 combined public safety personnel, a little more than 300 on the police side and a few more than 200 on the fire department side. That, without qualification, dwarfs any of the communities, even if you were to put them in combination together. We are a significantly larger public safety operation than even of the other three communities combined. And I think the types of incidents that you see transpire in a city of approximately 110,000 people with a very diverse population in an urban center are in many cases different than you would see in any of these other communities. So the governance model only affords us one vote. So my vote or the city manager's vote on that committee would be the same as the other three communities, even though the public safety profile is significantly different and the number of personnel is, as I indicated, significantly more. I don't think that puts the city of Lowell in a good position, quite candidly. Any new type of technology that we would want to introduce into that emergency operations center, ShotSpotter, AVLs that we use in our cruises, the GPS location system, are a real-time crime center, which is the new future of police operations, where you combine things like ShotSpotter, video, any type of that. I would have to go to that board, and I would only have one vote among four to try and introduce any kind of a new operations or a new technology into that communication center. And I think that would put our community at a disadvantage. The city of Lowell also, our current operations in the communications center, in many cases, is better than the other communities. The city of Lowell, a few years ago, invested significant money into that operations center. So I have a digital, very good radio system at our disposal for the police department that can be encrypted. At least one of the other communities is significantly behind in terms of their communications capability in the radio aspect, and so they need to invest significant money. Our community has already done that. So we're substantially in a better position. I think the financial savings that have been talked about are very minimal for the city, and I think it's certainly outweighed by some of the detriments. Let me say in summary, I think the biggest factors that would cause me to not look favorably on this is the loss of local control, an added layer of bureaucracy for any changes or any advances in that communications room for the city that does not currently exist. Currently, I can go in, because I operate the center management for the city, I can go in and institute new policies and new procedures. I wouldn't be able to do that. Lowell, without question, has 60 to 70% of the calls for service. We likewise are going to put in somewhere around 60% of the financial contribution to run this center, but the governance model only gives us 25% of a vote in terms of guidance and management of this structure. I think that's a disadvantage for our community. And one thing that cannot be easily quantified and reduced to graphs and charts is that face-to-face interaction that we would lose. So in summary, I think the Emergency Communications Center for the City of Lowell is an absolutely critical component of the delivery of public safety to this community. It provides an essential lifeline between the residents of the city and their police and fire officials that operate in the field trying to keep them safe. I think we're best served if that function remains under our direct control through the city council and the city manager. And for those reasons I specified, at this time I would recommend against the city of Lowell proceeding it to our regional dispatch center. I think we're too big of a community to do this at this time.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent. Also joining us, Council Samaras and Mayor Elliott. It was actually the mayor's motion a few meetings ago that brought this topic up. Mr. Mayor, any comments?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm pleased to hear the recommendation from the manager and the chief of police, quite frankly. I think it made my opinion certainly well known in the past and even just recently. And I think as the dialogue continues, I agree with members of the subcommittee that, there are sort of three layers when I look at this. Clearly, one is financial, and we're always looking to save money at some level, knowing that, we need to do more with less. But I think I would actually put that on level number 3. I think the logistical issue that the chief has spoken to in the past, as well as dispatchers, the number and the volume of calls that this dispatch center accepts on a daily, weekly, monthly basis is staggering, all with minimal disruption, if you will. And I think that is the primary concern when we're talking about response time and how critical it is, and being able to transmit that or translate that information that they get over the phone to officers who, they know where to go. So I think that's sort of the second issue. But I think the primary concern that has been addressed is the organizational structure, and adding another layer of bureaucracy, if you will, to this, I think jeopardizes our ability to improve and maintain strong public safety period in the city. So when you look at the chain of command, and I think that's what's important, that we have a manager and a chief of police that can make changes without having to go to a board. And in my opinion, authorities may work in some instances. Shared services do make some sense. Look, we have wastewater that we share those services amongst the communities, but I just don't feel that we should be, we shouldn't have to worry about making policy changes and having to go to a board with a vote. I mean, that clearly is the paramount or an important issue, but accountability, control. If there's a problem, the chief goes to correct it. If there's a problem, why should he have to worry about so many other things as well as the manager, and then have to be concerned about, well, I have to go to an authority to make some changes or identify what's happening. So I don't think in this case regionalization of this service for an urban center makes any practical sense. So I'm going to support the recommendation. I supported it to begin with, and excuse me, I didn't think this was the best fit for the city to begin with. So thank you for taking up the motion. I'm not sure what the next step is. Is it, Mr. Manager, you bring in a recommendation, because I think the process is to. We have to vote on this. Is that correct? No?
Mr. Manager?
Well,
I'm
in the
sorry, thank you, Mr. Chair.
yeah, and it is on the council agenda tonight for subcommittee reports. I would like your direction as to how you want me to proceed, but I would make a recommendation not to proceed with joining this governing board. Just as an aside, we were talking about a better way for us to approach this issue is for us to host some communities. Is we have the ability right now to host one of these communities as a revenue-producing project, and as we look into developing our new police station as a feasibility study, maybe incorporating a larger communications center to host other communities and generate revenue for that purpose.
Great, thank you. At this point in time, I'd like to open up to any members of the public who wish to speak on this subject. Welcome, ma'am. If you could just state your name and address for the record.
Hi, I'm TJ Cooper. I'm a dispatcher for the city of Lowell. Been there for 23 years. Just very quickly, what's concerning with the presentation that was just presented, Lowell currently has 6 dispatchers on all shifts, and the most dispatchers this regional dispatch center would have on would be 10. Now, Lowell has 6, Chelmsford has 2, Tewksbury has 2, and Drake has 2. So we're losing staff, and our call volume is not going to go down just because we joined a regional dispatch center. So right off the bat, there's less staff. We do have genuine concerns with delayed calls, delayed responses, incorrect addresses that we're receiving from Essex Regional Dispatch. And we also have genuine concerns for our public, for our first responders. We've had vastly different experience with Essex Regional Dispatch from what's being presented. We're having issues with dropped calls, and one other thing I just wanted to mention is layoffs, because if this were to go through, absolutely we would be laid off. There's no guarantee that any of us are going to be given a job. I don't think it's the intent of any chief that's involved in this that they're trying to get rid of us. But there's no, after 23 years, I would be laid off and I'd lose all my benefits. That's a concern. We're also, the fact that our own peers, our first responders, we have the endorsement of the Lowell Firefighters Union and the Patrolmen's Union, they're against this. They don't want it either. I think that needs to be brought up. And as far as knowledge, I think the citizens and the first responders for the city of Lowell deserve to have dispatchers that have firsthand knowledge of landmarks and the layout of the city. Dispatchers should have home field advantage, as every second counts in a true emergency, and we see no benefit with this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cooper. Anybody else?
My name is John McDonough. I live at 26 Highland Street, right here in lovely Lowell, Massachusetts. And I want to congratulate you guys and gals for your excellence, for your service to the community, for laying your life on the line for us. The avenue of excellence that you're bringing us down, Kevin, is miraculous. But all that good stuff said, I wanted to bring it to your attention that the Regional Dispatch Center on paper looks like a really good idea. You are in the emergency dispatch business. We can't go anyplace else. They don't know where the Commodore steps are. They don't know where the back of Zayre's is. They don't know where the Dairy Queen are. The Lowell dispatchers know where all that stuff is. Instantly. This business of we'll put those landmarks in the computer. We're going to get pinpointing of your cell phone location. That's never coming. I remember talking to interviewing Eddie Davis probably 10 years ago. And I asked him, when will we have pinpoint accuracy for cell phones? When I call up, it says I'm right in City Hall. We should have it by next summer. That's 10 years ago. The technology they're talking about is held up by my understanding, by the FCC. The FCC will not release this data to police departments. Why? I have no idea. That's a question for Nikki Songas. But that's the big holdup, is when you get cell phone data that says you're standing inside City Hall, then I'll begin to think about regional 911 centers. Just think about an earthquake. If an earthquake happens in Lowell, you call out to Tewksbury. Tell them where you are. Oh, I can see a Hafner sign. How good is that? That's not going to save any lives. Once this leaves here, once you guys send this out to regional dispatch, you're going to have as much pull with this new entity as you do with the regional bus company, with the regional school. You're going to have that. There's nobody in this room can tell a regional school what to do. And we're finding out there's nobody in this room that can tell the regional transit authority what to do. You guys are doing a great job. Thanks for your service.
Thank you, Mr. McDowell. Anyone else this time?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. My name is Richard Demers, 44 Lamb Street here in Lowell. Looking at the district agreement, one of the things in there says you have to agree to an inter-municipal agreement, which I think we have with NEMLIC. I think all the cities and towns have pretty much covered that position. On the fire side, you have the District 6 agreement for mutual aid. The other thing with regionalization is your startup, you may have your 5 or 6 dispatchers from Lowell, your 2 or 3 from Chelmsford or whatever, but as they get there and they decide, this isn't for me, and time goes on, a year or two, the dispatchers that you had who are working in your facility are no longer working there. They're being trained by a regional dispatcher. And now it is not turned into a Lowell, a Chelmsford, a Drake, or a Tewksbury. It's turned into a regional dispatch center without those connections. And I think that's really, really important. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burrs.
Hello, can you hear me? I don't think this is on because I've been sitting over there and missing a few words here and there. You
We
did?
can hear you.
I don't need one.
You don't need a
You
microphone.
can hear me if you're out on Central Street. I know. I raised 5 kids. I don't need a microphone. Okay, my name is Anne Marie Page. I own the home with my husband at 26 Fremont Street in Lowell, Mass. I sit on the board of the Centerville Neighborhood Action Group, and I'm vice president of the Citywide Neighborhood Council. We have 2 other leaders here, Patrick Farmer from Centerville Neighborhood Action Group and Nancy Judge from the Highlands. And we realize this is the first day back from a nice long holiday weekend, so that's why the room isn't packed. So, number 1, I did not get the name and title of the young lady that spoke and made this presentation.
Beverly Woods.
Beverly Wood. I can find you now. Thank you. Okay. And I've always been a supporter of the Lowell Police Department and the Lowell Fire Department. And I'm here to aggravate you tonight because of them, because they get me to the hospital on time. So, if it's not broke, you don't fix it. I agree with what Councilor Mercier said. We have a system that's working. We are the 4th largest city in the state. Chelmsford, Drake, and Tewksbury is a total other world. And I mean total. My mother lived in Drake, my sister lived in Chelmsford, and I have friends in Tewksbury. It is a total other world. We are the 4th largest city in the state. So, it might sound good, but I know you're not thinking money versus 911. My husband hangs up 911. Before that phone hits it, I can hear that siren coming up that hill. That's what's working now. That's what I like. I don't want it going like a ping pong ball or follow the dots. Remember when you were a kid, you had that follow the dots book? I don't want that. That 911 hangs up. They have them on the line, and they're on their way. That's the way it's working. It's not broke. Don't fix it. And I certainly would not put a $sign next to somebody's life. So we know that's not what's interesting. I looked at the little study, and it was all about Chelmsford, Drake, and Tewksbury, which is not us. And again, the territorial touch. These people behind us, they know us, they know where we live, they know the good guys, the bad guys, they know what cop to send. I know it's police officer, I'm just cutting it short, right? So, I mean, they know. They send their fire truck, they know. They've got it down packed to a science. It's not broke, don't fix it. So, as I usually do and put my cards on the table, I haven't heard anything great. I really don't think it's gonna work. And I know one thing, boy, if I was playing a game in an election year, I wouldn't vote for this one. I thank you kindly for all you do for us.
Thank you, Mr. Page. Anyone else?
Lisa Demers, 44 Lamb Street, Lowell, Mass. I've spoken at a previous meeting about this as well. And I'm a dispatcher in the town of Chelmsford. So I can speak to the job as well. We are different from Lowell, but we're also different from Tewksbury, and we're also different from Drake. This plan doesn't work for any of those towns or cities involved. Nowhere in the plans does it actually talk about the call volume that each center takes. It just strictly talks about the 911 calls that are coming in. They mention Essex, and they mention how Essex can take these 911 wireless calls, weed them out, and only send us one. We don't have to look beyond in Chelmsford to what happened this weekend. It was in the papers. I'm sure many of you have seen it. Several calls came in, so that's not working either. I'm not sure that you don't want repetitive calls coming in when there's a major incident. Somebody can provide you extra information. I think where the state missed the mark, and maybe where the cities and towns can get together and work on something, is getting the 911s into your own call centers. Flat out, just into your own call centers. Eliminate the middleman.
That's right.
Serve the public the best way possible. It's not about money, then show us a plan that doesn't revolve around money. I'm seeing a plan up there on the board where cost savings, this, that. Oh, you have the same amount of dispatches. No, even the numbers don't add up for the complement for 24/7 for Drake at Tewksbury and Chelmsford, and they certainly don't add up for the complement for 24/7 for when you add Lowell into that mix. So the numbers aren't true to fact. So that's something that it should be worked on before anybody considers this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Anyone else? Council Belenja?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For starters, I would like to welcome, I am the City Council representative to NEMCOG, and I personally would like to welcome Beverly Woods and Jay to City Hall. And I want to thank you for all the hard work you've done on this issue for a number of years. I've only been on the board about 18 months, but you've done a tremendous job, and your intent is to upgrade service on this issue and save cities and towns money, and you've sought out grants to do so. So I appreciate and applaud your efforts very, very much for the work you've done on this issue. But, you know, initially this was brought to my attention months ago, and when you mention cost savings to an elected official, it will always raise an eyebrow. But as time goes on and you gather all the information you can, you outreach. I met with all the dispatchers that spoke this evening for coffee a few weeks ago. They had some unbelievable insight that they brought to me. They are in the trenches. These are people that I lean on in issues like this who deal with it day in and day out. And they had some very valuable information, as Councilor Mercia mentioned, about the landscape of the city and the familiarity that there is no replacement for. And we are very, very lucky to have the dispatch crew in the city that we do. They are extremely dedicated and committed to public service, and that was the priority for them in this discussion. So with that being said, it's months later, and all the information is in. The finance numbers are in, and I just don't think in the end that this is a sensible move for the city of Lowell. For a savings of a few $100,000, we could lose those valuable seconds in an emergency call from an unfamiliar individual who answers, who's on that other line, who's unfamiliar, has good intent, no denying that, but it's just unfamiliar. And those second or two that we lose could make all the difference here. As I said earlier, at a later, earlier meeting that this issue does not pertain to money. It is the level of service that we provide to residents that is paramount. And I think we do an outstanding job as it is. We have an updated system to the tune of $4.5 to $5 million, and to do this all over again, I don't think is very wise. On top of that, when the fire chief, police chief does not recommend it, that pretty much seals my decision. I just don't think that I think this is beneficial for small towns throughout the Commonwealth, but when a larger city gets involved, I think the risk outweighs the reward here. And I just don't think that the city of Lowell should move forward on this issue. I do appreciate everyone's efforts, those who are involved, but in the end, when we're responsible for about 60% of the costs, we're going to save minimal money, but lives are at stake here, and that's paramount. And so I do not support the regionalization. I want to thank the public safety officials that are all here tonight that do a good job day in and day out, and I think they need our support. So with that being said, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion not to take part in the regionalization district agreement.
Second.
Mr. Clerk, roll call, please.
Chairman Rourke.
Yes.
Counsel Belanger.
Yes.
Counsel Mercier.
Yes.
3 yeas.
Thank you for everyone involved in speaking on this subject. It was well said, points were well made, and we'll bring this motion to the City Council meeting tonight for a vote, and I would imagine that the same vote that we just took here would take place this evening. So everyone that's here and has spoken on this subject, thank you very much. Moving on, there's one more item on the agenda. Is the use of tasers by the Lowell Police Department. Superintendent?
We are just about ready to act on where we are going to purchase and deploy and train our officers in the use of a taser, which is actually the correct term is it's a conducted electrical weapon. And this system will allow us to deal with people that are assaultive, combative, and a danger to the community and our officers with less than lethal technology. Now, having said that, I have an expert here that is from the Waltham Police Department, Officer DeChara, who can give you an explanation. He has a PowerPoint prepared. But there is no silver bullet, councilors, with respect to taking a assaultive and dangerous person into custody, even one that is unarmed. In my experience over 35 years, almost 34 years, excuse me, in law enforcement, if somebody wants to fight with the officers that are going to take that person into custody, in many, many cases, the individual and sometimes very often the officer will suffer some injuries. And so there is no panacea here. There's no silver bullet. But this technology is called less than lethal, and it gives us, the officers in the field, a better opportunity to take these individuals into custody without substantial injuries to either the officer or the person that we're dealing with. When you look at the state of law enforcement over the past year or two, there's numerous examples of police officers having to deal with assaultive individuals. Some of them very tragically. The officers use lethal force on the individuals, most notably the incident in Ferguson, Missouri. When I looked at that incident, I became very concerned because the officer had to take that individual into custody after being assaulted, but the officer didn't have access, for whatever reason, to less than lethal technology, and the officer was left with the only option that he had was the use of his service weapon, his firearm, which obviously had a very negative result for that community. So it caused me to look at this. In addition to this, both both collective bargaining units for the police department approached me. They were very much interested in this. They thought it would be a very positive addition to our weapons systems in the city, and I agreed with them. So we have just about ready to purchase these. I wanted to bring it to the community and the city council subcommittee as way of a public notification and a public input for this, and that's why we're here this evening. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce Officer Chuck DeChara from the Waltham Police Department. He's going to give us hopefully a brief introduction about these less than lethal technology.
Thank you, Superintendent. Officer?
Does he got a mic?
The green light is on. Is the green light on?
Press it.
Now it's on. Okay. So I get involved with TASER from that reason, protect citizens and protect the police officers. As of right now, there's 341 police departments in Massachusetts, and over 200 of them now are deploying TASERs as a use of force option. So I do want to talk about that. And again, this TASER's been looked at. I know it's controversial at times, but TASER's been looked at multiple times. There's been multiple studies out there, and all of the studies from the IACP, which is the International Association of Chiefs of Police, PERF, Police Executive Research Forum, all the studies have come out the same, which is, and these are facts, the use of tasers cuts down on injuries to suspects, it cuts down on injuries to police officers, it cuts down on officer-involved shootings, and it cuts down on civil liability. And those are facts, much like if we talked about seatbelts and airbags, and I said that seatbelts and airbags save lives and cut down on injuries, there wouldn't really be much to debate because it's backed up by facts and similar to TASER, same type of deal. So I'm going to run through a quick PowerPoint presentation, and then if you have any questions about TASER and how they work, then we'll go over it. I have tased multiple police officers in training. I've tased suspects in violent altercations. I did tase the chief.
I think you tased me. So.
I might have. I apologize for that. And I've been tased myself 4 times, so that's kind of the way it works. So I do have experience with them. Okay, the mission of TASER is to protect life. Why TASER? They may reduce, if I say TASER, it's conducted electrical weapons, different terminology, but it may reduce the use of deadly force. The last statistics that was out there is they would call the SAVE, which is a person's armed with a weapon. You hit him with a taser, it doesn't result in officer-involved shooting. They would call that a SAVE. And the last study that came out, they could fill the Rose Bowl plus 10,000 with how many people have been hit with a taser versus deadly force. It may reduce injuries to suspects. It may reduce injuries to police officers. It may reduce civil litigation by suspects. TASER International has sold approximately 720,000 tasers worldwide. It's in 107 different countries. There's been over 118,000 law enforcement, private security, and military agencies using them, and more than 260,000 taser brands have been sold. Field use application, give or take 2%. Basically, there's been over 3.26 million people tased involving training police officers and involving suspects in the field. Okay, this is just a study on Florida State Gulf University, just talking about use of force as an option and how TASER has become one of the primary use of force options out there on the street for police officers. This is another study out of Michigan, and it just talks about in 2003 when they first started deploying tasers. And historically in Massachusetts, tasers have been around since about 2004, so about 10 years or so. And this is where they're at now from 2003 to 2008. That just shows the drop in excessive force claims against police officers in regards to TASER. This is another one out of Michigan that looked at multiple TASER incidents, and it talks about excessive force claims are down 95%. And again, these numbers can all be looked at. This is when TASER was first introduced. Sometimes there's a spike when they first hit because it's new. There's a lot more deployments, and what they found with TASER a lot of times is Just the mere wearing of a taser on the belt and that's the reason why the taser I have, there's no live cartridges. It's black because I use it on the SWAT team, but they recommend yellow tasers, and the reason for that is for visibility. So if they first, historically, when departments first go to taser, there's a little bit of a spike. Police officers are getting used to using them, and then they drastically reduce. And what happens is, and I'll speak from experience, once you've been hit with a taser, you generally don't want to get hit again. It's not a pleasurable experience. You're okay after the event, but it's not really an enjoyable thing to go through. So what happens is now when they see the officer arriving and they have a taser, a lot of times you get a lot more cooperation, if that makes sense. So that's why you see that spike and then the drop usually. Okay, this is just talking about, this is another big study they did out of Houston Police Department. When Houston Police Department is a very big department, I think they're the largest agency deploying tasers. Every police officer in the city of Houston carries a taser. And this is talking about workman's claims compensation. And where it drops the numbers of that is if I don't have to go hands-on with a suspect who's violent and combative, and I can, from a distance, hit him with a taser, he falls down, we take him into custody, there's a lot less chance of officer's injury. So now, that's where the workman's comp, a blown shoulder or a knee injury puts a police officer out injured because of a violent altercation. They're finding that the use of tasers has really reduced workman's comp claims to the city. And this is just talking about other use of force options between risk of injuries from firearms to police batons to punches and kicks, and showing that the use of taser prevents injuries. A lot less chance of, the first one is firearms. Obviously, there's a much greater chance of death and serious injury from a firearm, but also striking somebody with a police baton or striking somebody with a punch or a kick that's combative, there's more of a chance of injury from me punching a suspect or hitting him with a baton versus a taser. The taser injuries usually result, if there is one, usually results from they get hit with a taser and they fall, and sometimes you have minor secondary injuries. That's more chance of injury, which is going to be less injury than if you hit somebody with a baton or a punch or a kick. So this is just showing that the taser is down the bottom for risk of injury to suspects. This is just a study that came out. There's a lot of, if you looked at batons, pepper spray, chokeholds, firearm, taser has been scrutinized more than any of them. If you added up all the other use of force options that police officers can use and combine them, they haven't been studied as much as taser. The military has done them, the Chiefs of Police Association have done them, ACLU has looked at them, so this is a lot of the studies that are in there that you can take a look at to back up some of the information that's out there. Okay, and this is just a quick, going to go over how they work a little bit. This is where the taser comes from. Thomas A. Swift electrical rifle. Just a quick history lesson. He's the person that first came out with the tasers. Okay, methods of delivery. Again, these are dead cartridges in here, trust me. But the way it works is a lot of volunteers, but trust me, you really don't want to volunteer. You only do it once. So basically 2 ways of getting hit with a taser. The first way is what they call a drive stun, which is where you can come up and make contact with a suspect. Again, these are dead cartridges, where the pain is more localized, and you make contact with the suspect, similar to like being hit with a hot iron. It burns, it's strictly pain, it works as on the sensory overload, the nerve endings, and it causes a great deal of pain. That's the first way. And the second way is by firing 2 probes. And that's what you saw in the video. These 2 probes attached to a copper wire, and what they are basically, in plain English, it's a number 9 fish hook straightened out. So instead of the hook, it's a number 9 fish hook straightened out. It gets shot out of the weapon. And there's 2 probes. The first dart goes on the top Lincoln light. The second one goes on the bottom. And what happens is both darts hit, and electricity follows the path of least resistance. And when you get hit, you get sensory and motor nervous system overload. So when you get hit with the 2 probes, it's worse because it's not just strictly pain. Now you're getting NMI, which, not to give you a science lesson, but it's neuromuscular incapacitation, which is basically involuntary muscle lockup. causes confusion of the brain where they're unable to make decisions, so it causes sensory and motor nervous system overload. So a lot of times it results in the body locking up and the person falling to the ground. And basically when the person gets hit, it's a 5-second ride off of the electrical weapon, and then after 5 seconds, the officer reevaluates or takes a person into custody. And that's basically how they work: drive stun or get shot with the 2 probes. And deploying, what level you're going to deploy that use of force depends on the suspect's resistance level. Okay, a lot of people are afraid of electricity, and this is just demonstrating here. And there's a lot of misconceptions out there in the press. I read an article in the Herald the other day. It said 50,000 volts, 50,000 volts. And you always hear that. They're not really getting hit with 50,000 volts. When it comes out of the weapon, it's 50,000 volts. By the time the electricity gets into the body, it's like 12 to 1,500. But it's not the volts that hurt you or kill you or cause death. It's the amperage. Okay, and this is just showing that even though it's 50,000 volts, it's very low amps. So it's 16 amps in a regular wall outlet. I don't know if anybody else has done this besides me, but when you're a kid, you stick the key in the outlet and try to start the house up. Just me. Or you stick stuff in the outlet and you get a shock. That's 16 amps, and that's enough to get your heart to flutter. It scares the crap out of you, and that's pretty much, that's 16 amps. And Taser is always trying to get better with their technology to lower the amperage. And a Christmas tree bulb is 1 amp. So this is how much amperage you're getting in a typical Taser, 0.0036. So even though the voltage sounds high when they talk about it in the press, it's 50,000 volts, but very low amperage. You're getting 0.0036 amps. So that's why it's not causing people to die and in custody deaths and all those things that they like to say are taking place. Okay, and this just affects, I talked about the drive stun versus NMI. Drive stun, the central nervous system is a command center, brain and spinal cord. The drive stun affects sensory, which is strictly pain. Getting hit with the 2 probes is more of a game changer. That affects NMI, involuntary muscle lockup, confusion in the brain, unable to really make decisions, and then also as well as pain. So a couple different systems that it affects. And then this stuff is, this is the next couple slides just talks about the computer program and how everything is recorded. So I know the big hot topic now is video cameras and having the police under a microscope, and that's fine. They do make a model that has a video camera on this, but the deal is this is really, it's not a firearm, it's actually a computer. So everything that you do, and this is what these next couple slides are showing, is recorded on here, okay? Which is, so it's not, you hit somebody 7 times with a baton, and did you hit them 3 times, did you hit them 15 times? Everything is recorded in here. So if I pull the trigger and I keep the trigger depressed for 10 seconds, it's going to show 10 seconds. If I tase my friend here 15 times, it's not going to say, it's going to show that I tased him 15 times. So it really does, it's a computer and the polices itself. So what it's showing on the next couple of slides on evidence.com, and it really is, I'm not very computer literate, but you plug it in and everything is recorded from how many times you pull the trigger, even if you just turn it on, which is pretty good, because that's what they're finding now a lot of times is just the mere taking this out of your holster and putting those lasers causes people to comply. Taking this on and just giving a quick spark test makes people have a change in behavior, makes them, I guess, rethink their thought process, right? And you can see the chief has been tased. The minute I turned this on, he jumped, right? Because once you've been tased once, you remember that crackling. So, and that will be recorded on here also. If the police officer drew it, turned it on, gave a spark test. So everything is recorded on here. And that's really what just shows next. A couple of slides are showing evidence.com light, which is how everything is recorded on here. And again, this is really just all your evidence stuff, explaining how taser. So this will show that you turned it on for 5 seconds. This will show that you took it off safe. This will show you turned it on. So again, just some slides to show that that's how it works.
Right. And I'll just add, after we purchase and train all the officers on the use of the taser, every time that we'll have a policy. And so we have a model policy that the Tewksbury Police Department uses. They've supplied it to us. We'll probably adjust it slightly for our own purposes. But anytime this taser is used in the city of Lowell, there will be a download of all the information, as the officer said, and we will conduct an investigation to make sure it conforms with our policy and it was used properly. And so we will do that to conform with, make sure it's being used appropriately. So.
And as part of the training, Massachusetts, I teach all over the country taser. Massachusetts has very strict guidelines. It's different from other states. So, they have strict guidelines in place, tasering people in handcuffs, tasering juveniles, elderly people, pregnant people, people that are disabled. So Massachusetts is different from other states, has everything ironed out that goes right in your policy. This is the way the officers are trained. Don't use it as a tool of punishment. Use it to stop some of these violent action and take them into custody. So a lot of the stuff really is spelled out in the policy in the state.
So what I can say is that in late June, we had a very violent incident downtown in the city of Lowell. We had an individual that had some issues, psychological issues. Unfortunately, I believe he was off his medication, as is a common theme you hear occasionally. And the officers that responded down there in the middle of the day, and I know Councilor Rourke happened to be nearby, they were confronted with a individual with a large hunting knife that had tried to stab a postal worker. And he was in the middle of Market and Central Street, I believe, and he had the knife, and he was waiting, self-admittedly, to stab a police officer. So my officers responded. Now Sergeant Golden got there, and we were faced with a very dangerous individual armed with a very, dangerous weapon, a big knife. And so we were in a standoff for a few minutes there, and unfortunately, because of the person's mental state at the time, it appears as though the officers were going to have to use deadly force. But fortunately, the situation was alleviated when a National Park Service ranger arrived on the scene. He did have a taser, and we directed him to use the taser on the individual, and that individual was tased, and he was taken into custody very quickly without any injuries to the individual, and certainly without having the officer requiring to use deadly force against him. So that individual is very fortunate. That's what I think we'd classify as a save, because that individual is receiving mental health treatment at this point instead of potentially deceased or very, very seriously injured from being shot.
And not to mention, Chief, going back to the incident, that was during lunchtime on a summer day, and it was multiple citizens up and down Market Street and Central Street. So not only was the suspect saved, and chances are, someone walking by, it was a large crowd in that event. So point well taken. Councilor Mercer?
Chief, I know this is probably not relevant to this, but I want to know if you know anything about blunt impact projectile. I read an article in the newspaper, the Lowell Sun, as a matter of fact, about this releases green marking powder on impact. It's displayed after being fired at a test dummy. In other words, it's a projectile that shoots a green dye. It's called blunt impact projectile. Are you familiar with any of that?
I think there's several different variations of that. I think they kind of go in the general category, Chuck, of a rubber bullet type of thing. And you might remember after one of, I think it was the Red Sox World Series celebrations, the Boston Police Department used something like that, and that unfortunately it had fatal results, and the city paid out a significant lawsuit for that. Every one of these individual tools, whether it's a taser or an OC spray or impact tool like a baton, they all have their use. They all have a particular niche in our use of force policy, when you can use certain things and when you cannot. And so everything is slightly different, but this is an additional tool that gives the officer the ability to take somebody into custody without using that blunt force instrument or a baton, where you may potentially break somebody's leg or something like that. This thing, once the taser is completed, once the 5 seconds is up, there's no ill effects unless they fall or something like that, right, Chuck?
Yeah, correct. And again, there's a lot of different less lethal, they call that less lethal force. There's bean bags, which is similar to what you're talking about, blunt trauma. There's pepper ball, and they all have their place, and they all have a risk of injury. And what they're finding is, and we've used historically on the SWAT team for years, we use munitions similar to that, which is long range, extended impact, and it gives injury similar to a baton strike. And we've just found that there's since we switched to taser, we still carry both because we have different tools for doing the job, like the chief says. But we have found that the taser has been more effective and less chance of injury. With those impact rounds, the last studies, typically you have to hit somebody 3 times, and sometimes they're able to go back into a house, and versus a taser, kind of, our experiences drops them right away. So we've had better luck with the taser than that type of round.
Yep.
But they both have their place.
So, Chief, what would an electronic control weapon cost?
Well, I'm glad. That's the last thing. They're relatively expensive. I don't have enough money to purchase one for every officer. They're approximately $1,100 per unit, and then you have to add in several hundred more dollars for training components. You have to have cartridges to train with them and stuff. So, that's kind of cost prohibitive, but because we were able to save some money over the last year or so, we've been able to put away some money. And I think at this point, we're going to purchase about 60 of them, and the officers will have to share them. But then my plan is, over the course of the next 3 years, to gradually purchase more and more every year, so that eventually, over a period of 3 years, we'll get one to every police officer. I think they're that valuable of a tool.
So the projectiles that go out, do you use them again, or
No.
once you use them, that's
Right,
it?
that's right. Once the taser is used, right, the taser is then taken, it's essentially quarantined,
Right.
taken out of service until we can download the data and finish the investigation on its use. Each time we'll investigate it, and then the officer would be given another taser to use while that one's out of service.
So even though the prongs come out and you don't have any more prongs, let's say,
Right.
projectiles, you still can use that
The stun,
device
yes, the
to
stun.
stun.
And then you
Oh.
get new cartridges. The other 2 key things, I know we're getting short on time, the ones that we will purchase will be yellow, so they'll be easily identifiable, so the officers or people, the general public, will know right away their tasers.
I think it's a wonderful
And
idea.
they'll be cross-drawn, so they'll never be on the same side as the weapon.
Right.
They'll be cross-drawn so that the officer can't, limit the possibility of a mistake.
I remember like 10 years ago down at Cross Point Tower when Ed Davis was the superintendent, and I went to that civilian
Yes.
police academy. They did a demonstration, and one of the police officers volunteered.
That
I
was
thought
me.
we had them.
That was me.
That was you?
That was me.
You flapped around like a...
He did it. No, it does. It really does hurt, but it hurts for a few seconds, and then you're fine. But like Officer Jakara said, you don't want to experience again. So.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief.
Quickly, anybody in the audience wishing to speak on this subject? No? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor. I appreciate that.
Councilor Belanger?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It sounds definitely something worthwhile. The chief seems to be supportive, and the officers, if they would want to go forward, then I'll be glad to stand behind them.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
With that being said, I'd like to accept this as a report of progress, Mr. Chairman. Make a motion.
Second.
Mr. Clerk? Yes.
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 Once again, thank you very much for attending this evening. Got a lot done.
Thank you.
And have a good night.